paccaya phasso. It was said, with consciousness as condition there is mentality, materiality. How that is so, Ananda, should be understood in this way. If consciousness were not to descend into the mother's womb, would mentality, materiality take shape in the womb? Sadly not, Venerable Sir. If after descending into the mother's womb consciousness were to depart, would mentality, materiality be generated into this present state of being? Certainly not, Venerable Sir. If the consciousness is, or consciousness of a young boy or girl, were to be cut off, would mentality, materiality grow up, develop, and reach maturity? Certainly not, Venerable Sir. Therefore, Ananda, this is the cause, source, origin, and condition for mentality, materiality, namely consciousness. Now, consciousness is the life. Because when consciousness, if the consciousness doesn't descend the mother's womb, the embryo doesn't grow. So we understand not only this in this place and in other places as well, these three things must join together to initiate life. In other tradition, a soul must enter the body. So for them, it is the soul that keeps what do you call this? The combination of ovum and sperm operates. But in the Buddha's teaching, is very clearly stated here. Vijnana Chayananda Matukuchinna Okkamisata Apiduko Namarupam Matukuchin Samuchisati Samuchisatati Nohetam Bhante. Vijnananchi Ananda Matukuchismin Okkamitva Vokkamati Apinuko Namarupam Ittataya Abhi Nibbhanti Siddhatati Nohetam Bhante. So that is in Pali. So when the consciousness descends to the mother's womb at the moment of joining ovum and sperm, at that instant, if the consciousness does not join, then would that combination of embryo grow? So Ananda said no, because it is the consciousness that gives the life. So this consciousness, in according to Abhidhamma, at the moment of conception it is called Patisandhi, relinking consciousness, Patisandhi Vijnana. And then throughout life this continues in a continuous means not the same consciousness, but it's changing all the time, changing within itself, continues, and it goes to dormant state. The dormant state is called Bhavanga. The word Bhavanga also is Abhidhamma coinage, not found in sutras. Bhava, as we all have seen, is becoming, bhava. Coming from the root bhu, to be. So, anga means limb or connection, or what you call the agent that join one life with another. And therefore it is called bhava anga. Our body parts also are called anga. Hand is anga, legs are angas, and so forth. Sometimes they call anga pachanga in Pali. These are all limbs, like the limbs of a tree. So, therefore they call it bhava anga, bhavanga. And then at the moment of death, last moment, this departs. Therefore it is called chuti vijnana or chuti chitta. Sometimes it is called patisandhi chitta, bhavanga chitta, and chuti chitta. Sometimes it is called patisandhi vijnana, bhavanga vijnana, and chuti vijnana. Chuti vijnana is, bhavanga vijnana, chuti vijnana are rarely used. Most commonly used
bhavanga chitta.
Chitta, bhavanga chitta, chuti chitta. Here Buddha continued to use the word vijnana. So, if consciousness not descended in the mother's womb, then okay, the embryo doesn't grow. And Buddha asks, if after descending into the mother's womb, consciousness were to depart, you all know, learn biology, there are sometimes even mothers don't know that the consciousness departed and embryo died. They call it spontaneous abortion. Spontaneous abortion. Without anybody's interference, consciousness disappears, departs.
When that happens, when the consciousness disappears in the embryo,
yeah,
like no data is
no,
going.
After that, no data. All data completely wipe out.
Okay.
And so it is explained in Buddhist terminology that is upaghataka karma. Upaghataka karma. Upaghataka means once life starts, something all of a sudden happens and it disappears, cuts off and dies. It can happen in the mother's womb, it can happen while the baby is being born. So if, and Buddha says here, going one step further, if consciousness of a young boy or girl were to be cut off, then the boy or girl will not grow. If the consciousness were cut off in adults or teenagers, adults, any time consciousness cut off is considered to be dead. So, this is a very interesting point. Even here, Buddha does not give a particular place where consciousness is. At the moment of conception, consciousness descends to the embryo. It even cannot call embryo without consciousness. It is just two cells and fuse together as one cell. And this does not exist without consciousness. So, we that is why in Buddhist, in our Vinaya, bhikkhu become parajika even if he encourage, support or advise somebody to abort. He becomes parajika because he cuts off the life. In the life in Brahmanic tradition is called prana, and in Pali we call pana, and that is why in the precept we say pana atipata. Atipata means cutting off or depriving. That means the ability to breathe depends on consciousness. If the person is totally, completely unconscious, there may be some lung functioning, heart functioning, but the person is virtually dead. And the consciousness, that is why sometimes people are in coma for long period of time. It is very seldom one can come out of coma and start living. Otherwise, once a person goes to coma, virtually the person is dead. So the medical specialist wait and wait and wait and wait for long period of time to see whether the person will come back to life. So when the consciousness anyway departs, the person is dead. Therefore, once the consciousness departs, nobody knows where it is to bring it back. It's gone. So and also we must understand that it is not the same consciousness that goes from life to life. That is what Sati, Bhikkhu Sati's view. And Buddha refuted it, reprimanded him, and said how consciousness arises. Okay. Consciousness after that, when it becomes active, at the beginning it is just consciousness until senses are mature, senses are grown. This consciousness just remains dormant. When senses grow, eye, ear, nose, tongue and so on, then consciousness become active through these senses. So in Sati's Maha Nidana Sutta, Buddha mentioned how consciousness is named after their origin. For instance, when consciousness arises through eye, it is called eye consciousness. When consciousness arises through the ear, ear consciousness. Chakku viññāna, sota viññāna, gāna viññāna, and so forth. By the name through which consciousness arises. When we say eye consciousness, I-consciousness means equal consciousness arises through eye door, eye faculty. When consciousness arises through ear faculty, it is called sota viññāna. Sometimes it is translated as consciousness arises in the eye, consciousness arises in the ear. Consciousness does not arise in the ear or eye, but through the ear, eye, nose, tongue, and so on, consciousness arises. Otherwise, if none of these faculties function, if none of these faculties, if they are defunct, dead, consciousness does not arise through them. But still consciousness can arise in the mind which we don't know where. I myself personally don't know where it is. Buddha simply said, Durangamang ekacharang asarirang guhasayam ye chittang sanyame santi mokkandi marabandhana. The consciousness travels too far without body and dwells in a guha. Guha means cave. Where is this cave? Within these 5 aggregates there is some cave, cavity, place. It stays there. That means it stays means it doesn't remain. I cannot give an example like a rock or something. Even rock is changing. So it doesn't stay without changing. Within itself it's changing and operate within this body. And we see in Samyutta Nikaya and various other places, consciousness cannot exist by itself. We will see it here further. It is said, with mentality, materiality as condition, there is consciousness. So there must be both mentality and materiality for the consciousness to arise. How that is so, Ananda, should be understood in this way. If consciousness were not to gain footing in materiality, mentality, would an origination of the mass of suffering of future birth, aging and death be discerned? This is a very interesting question. We call suffering, origin of suffering, and so on. Where suffering origins? If there is no consciousness, where suffering origins? If there is no consciousness, how suffering could be identified? Only when there is consciousness. For instance, these books, they may suffer, we don't know. They suffer from heat and humidity, but we don't know. And nobody can they express trees in winter, maybe suffering a lot because of the cold, but there is no way for them to express. But all other beings that have consciousness, even animals, they express their suffering in one way or the other, which we don't detect, we don't always associate with them to identify how much they suffer and how they express it. However, they do express. So, only when there is consciousness, birth, aging and death we discern. We can say, so and so is born. When stillborn, the fetus is stillborn, we can say it is stillborn. Why it is stillborn? Because no consciousness. But otherwise it is called birth. Baby is born. When we say baby is born, we assume that there is a consciousness. When we say stillborn, It is a birth, but we don't call it a baby. So the word birth refers to being born with consciousness. We say aging. These things are aging. All inanimate objects are aging. But we simply say for convenient purpose, the books are getting old. We use the term. But the word we say it is getting old comes from the conscious mind. But the books themselves cannot express that. Similarly, death. We may say the book is dead, but it's an odd expression. We can say book is decayed. Also it is very uncommon expression. We can say book is getting old. That is okay. But decaying also okay. But this refers to living beings. Therefore, Ananda, this is the cause, source, origin and condition for consciousness, namely mentality, materiality. Without both mentality and materiality, consciousness does not arise. As we mentioned this morning, mentality is feeling, vedana, sanya, sankhara, attention. Phassa, vedana, sanya, chetana, manasikara, and life force. 5 factors are mentioned in Abhidhamma. In sutras, 4 factors are mentioned: Phassa, vedana, sanya, chetana. This manasikara, 5 factors. 5 factors. Abhidhamma added the 6th one, that is life continuum, jivitindriya. So, only when the materiality exists with the combination of mentality, consciousness arises there from that. So, it is to this section, this is another very interesting passage we can never find anywhere else, that one can be born, age and die, pass away and re-arise to this extent that there is a pathway for designation, to this extent that there is a pathway for language, to this extent that there is a pathway for description, to this extent that there is a sphere for wisdom, to this extent that the round turns for describing this state of being, that is, when there is mentality, materiality together with consciousness. When there is mentality, materiality together with consciousness, from there, to express these 2 factors. To express these 2 factors, there is designation, language, description, sphere for wisdom, and what means repetition of birth and death. So this language we use to express mentality, materiality. Description we use for mentality and materiality. language, and description, wisdom, and repetition of vattam vattati. Vatta means going in circle. Round and round and round and round is called vatta. Whenever we call existing in samsara, or when we call samsara, it invariably refers to a being with mentality, materiality, going in, dying and taking rebirth, dying and taking rebirth, dying and taking rebirth. Now, for trees, plants, vegetations, they also have reproduction, and they are what you call propagation and so forth. That we never call sankhara, vatta or samsara. The word samsara is used to an entity that has mentality, materiality together with consciousness. When the mentality, materiality and consciousness completely cease, then that individual's samsara, or that individual's vatta, going in circles, ceases to exist. That is why a Buddha and Arahant, because they end their vatta, sankhara repetition by completely bringing to an end of their mentality, materiality and consciousness. You are referring to something?
I'm just looking something up, don't mind me. I'm just looking up something. You can continue. You can keep going.
Okay. You hear me?
Yes.
Okay. In other words, these words are used for describing a being with mentality and materiality. So, then in other dependent origination discussion, like regular, ordinary, the one that we are familiar with, there is no particular section dealing with self. One other special feature in this discourse is that Buddha added the description, explaining, consideration and so forth of self. Why is that? Because Buddha wanted to show that this whole existence is taking place